Okay, so now we're going to talk about stage 2 of creating your sculptures. So remember, step 1 is to get a really basic form, all from one solid piece. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to get a little bit more into specifics, a little bit more into details. So here's where I'm going to think about like the position of the animal. So do I want it like sitting or standing or walking or whatever? I'm going to kind of go for like this type of a thing. So he's like, you know, looks like he's walking. So there's one leg kind of behind and one leg forward and one paw's lifted up a little bit. So I'm going to take the legs that I had, I'm going to move them so that it feels a little bit more like he's walking. Something a little bit more like that, okay? And I'm also going to think about like kind of assess the shapes that I have and decide if I did them well or not. So looking at the shapes here, I feel like maybe this is too big and that's a little too small, so my proportions are a little bit off. And then, you know, the head shape, obviously I'm missing like the shape of the head, like the nose and stuff like that. So that's gonna be my plan of attack first off, okay? So I'm gonna smush this down, make this a little bigger. And at this stage, you can totally add more clay. Think about it kind of more like the coil method, where you are adding pieces on and then smoothing them. So I'm just kind of like adding bulk to this. It's not like I'm forming a foot and then attaching a foot. I'm just adding more bulk where I need more bulk. And then making sure that you are compressing it and blending it, just like when you add coils on a coil vessel. Smoothing it out. Notice I'm like okay with my surface being kind of lumpy right now because I know I'm going to go back and do some stuff with texture later. If you are want to get really into making this very realistic, you could think in terms of anatomy. So like if you were in college and you were learning like a figure sculpting class, you would totally learn like the skeleton and muscle structure and probably create a sculpture of just like a human that's just muscles that, you know, looks kind of creepy, but it's so useful for figuring out like where is the form larger, where is it smaller, how do I make it look like it's actually real? Like if you know what's underneath of the skin, you are better able to kind of create a realistic interpretation. So if you are into it, you can totally look up, like I could look up a bear anatomy and figure out like where are the major muscle groups and the skeleton and all that kind of stuff, and that will help me get all of these shapes really accurate. If you don't want to go that far into doing a little bit more research, just kind of pay attention in your reference image. So if I look here, see how like I can see that this arm is connected to this like shoulder right there. So I'm going to make sure that in my form that's happening, that it feels like this like shoulder blade is really connected to this front leg here. Called an arm, didn't I? Same thing with like back here. Like you can see where like this is thigh and then that's belly. So I'm going to try to get that like definition, maybe by adding more clay to bulk it up here. Make it feel like the belly is really heavy. Big fat bear getting ready to hibernate or something. Making it feel like this is like a separate muscle than like stuff that's going on in here. So I'm gonna add more clay in there. And just remember, every time you're adding more clay, to really compress it and blend it really good. I could hear, as I was smoothing that down, a little air bubble pop. So if I hadn't smoothed that down, that air bubble would still be in there. Then we will have exploding bears in the kiln. That would not be good. Okay, so see how this is starting to look a little bit more realistic, a little bit more muscly, a little bit more like a natural thing, not just a lump of clay. So I could keep going with this. I'm not going to do everything right now because you don't want to watch a like 20-minute long video. So I'm going to move on now. If I was doing this like at home, and I will be doing this at home after I stop the video, I would come over to this side and kind of do the same thing. And if I don't have a reference image that matches like this, I can look at to get that perfectly. Over here, I'm going to have to use my imagination a little bit more, but that's where doing a little bit of research in anatomy might be helpful if you're feeling really stuck, or just remembering like a front leg is connected to a shoulder and a back leg is connected to a hip. Like just remembering those kinds of things will get you pretty far. So, all right, now I'm going to come back and think about the head, and this is where I'm going to use the reference images that are more like this or this. So trying to bring that like snout shape, thinking in terms of basic shape still. So it's kind of like triangular right there, and then the ears are sticking up. So I'm going to pinch out some little shapes for the ears. I hope you guys can see okay from the lighting. I have my phone propped up on cutting boards and chairs in my kitchen. So hopefully this works. Okay, so I pinched out ears. Whoa, those are way too big. He looks like a mouse. So I would take that down a little bit. And I'm just like kind of mushing the clay and observing my reference images, turning it all different directions. Wow, it's like a mouse. So it takes some time to really get it. I'm gonna stop talking and focus just for a minute. Take some time to get it to be the right shape that you need. Okay, so that's a little bit closer. Not perfect still, but it's a little bit closer, okay? So this is kind of the next step of taking your lump of clay, your big basic shape, and making it a little bit more specific. Then you would go even farther, and here is where your tools really come in handy. So getting it to feel like this space is a little bit more defined and closer, or this space. So you'll probably, this is my favorite tool right here. As you sculpt, I'm sure you'll find like, yes, this is my favorite tool. It does like everything I need it to do. But using the like skinnier pieces to kind of press in, make some more indentations. Like, you know, your finger can't really fit in there and do that. So making an indentation to make it look like the head is kind of like pressed, like he's looking down, the head's like kind of pressed into the body, if that makes sense. And then I'll add some more bulk over here to like his cheek and jowls. So you see how that made a difference right there? If it kind of makes the form feel a little bit different. So this is your next step, okay? After you have your basic shape, you're going through, you're making your shape more specific. Still not worrying too much about the tiny details, not worrying about the texture, still rotating it, looking at it from all angles, using your reference images, looking a little bit deeper into anatomy if necessary. Good luck.